Hey guys, tonight we drift back into a world where mornings don't begin with the friendly gurgle of your coffee maker, but with the grinding stone's rasp of cacao beans crushed slowly in the half-light of an Aztec home. You can almost feel the cool stone floor under your bare feet, the lingering smoke from last night's fire curling in the rafters. Outside, the day yawns awake with birdsong and the distant hum of markets opening. Here, hot chocolate is not the sweet, cozy treat, you know, but a ritual, a necessity, and honestly a bit of a challenge to your taste buds. Imagine sipping a drink that is warm, yes, but also bitter enough to make your mouth pucker. The first taste is earthy, almost sour, nothing like the sugary instant cocoa packets you stir lazily on a winter night. And if you're thinking, I probably wouldn't survive this, you're right, at least, not without training your palate, like an Aztec noble. For them, cacao was currency, medicine, and liquid power all at once. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and your local time. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little community reaches across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You cradled the vessel, perhaps a painted gourd, or a clay cup, its rim still warm from being poured high and frothy. There is no sugar to cushion the blow, no marshmallow waiting to dissolve. Just pure cacao, ground with patience, whisked into water until it becomes a drink of status. The fact is, cacao beans were so valuable that merchants carried them as money. One bean could buy you a tomato, a handful might get you a rabbit, and enough bags of them could buy you the favor of a noble. And here's the quirky detail. Not everyone was allowed to drink it. The frothy, bitter chocolate was considered far too precious for commoners, reserved instead for warriors, priests, and rulers. Historians still argue whether regular townsfolk ever sneaked a taste on festival days, or whether the rules were strictly enforced. Either way, you can picture the air thick with the smell of toasted cacao, while in the distance, the emperor sipped his 21st cup of the day, each flavored differently to keep the boredom at bay. You watch as the cacao paste is pressed into a block, dense, almost waxy, something that could sit on a shelf for weeks. This wasn't snack chocolate. It was closer to an ingredient, a compact form of wealth, almost like carrying around little bricks of espresso that double as coins. In fact, you imagine someone dropping one into their pouch and muttering the ancient equivalent of "don't spend it all in one place." The Aztecs weren't just drinking this stuff, they were literally pocketing it, trading it, measuring their livelihoods against it. The process of making that morning cup was as much performance as practicality. You'd see the cacao paste thinned with warm water, sometimes seasoned with maize flour to give it body. But the real artistry came in the pouring. Women lifted the liquid high above their heads and let it stream down into another vessel, back and forth until a frothy head formed. The foam wasn't a garnish, it was the soul of the drink. Without that delicate froth, your chocolate would be judged as flat, lifeless, and, frankly, embarrassing to serve. And here comes one of those quirky details you'll love. Flavorings were rarely sweet. Instead, you'd find chili peppers giving it a burn, or flowers lending perfume-like notes. Sometimes annatto seeds added a deep red color, or honey gave it the faintest sweetness if you were lucky. Imagine sipping hot chocolate that burned your throat before it even warmed your stomach. To the Aztecs, this was invigorating, a drink to sharpen the senses and fuel long days of ritual, battle, or ruling. To us, well, you'd probably be reaching for a glass of water. Still, historians argue whether this was always an elite indulgence, or if the recipe shifted, depending on your place in society. Did warriors in the field get watered down, spicy versions, while nobles luxuriated in the finest foamed cups? Or did the froth, regardless of who drank it, mark the common cultural thread, a shared symbol of vitality, power, and refinement? And then there's the Emperor Montezuma, famous for drinking cacao in quantities that would make even a modern coffee addict look restrained. Chroniclers claimed he consumed as many as 50 cups a day, each prepared in its own special vessel. Was he genuinely enjoying them, or just keeping up appearances of divine vigor? Historians still debate whether the number was exaggerated, but the image lingers: a ruler drowning in cacao, cup after frothy cup, his lips constantly stained with the bitter brew. As you sit back, you realize that this humble bean shaped not only tastes but also entire economies. Wars were fought over cacao-growing regions. Tribute was demanded in cacao beans. Priests offered it during rituals, and healers prescribed it for ailments. You wouldn't just drink it. You'd rub cacao paste on wounds, mix it into ointments, or, in some cases, use it as part of spiritual ceremonies. Imagine a world where your morning coffee run doubles as your rent payment, your energy boost, and your first aid kit. The air grows thicker in your imagination, the scent of roasting. Cacao lingers like smoke on your clothes. Somewhere nearby, a trader is counting out beans into neat stacks. Another hand reaches for the pestle, grinding, until your ears buzz with the rhythm of stone on stone. There's no sugar rush, no cozy winter nostalgia, a powerful, slightly bitter drink that carries with it the weight of status and survival. And as you cradle the cup in your hands, you know this is not dessert. This is identity, empire, and life itself, swirling bitter and foamy in the clay vessel before you. The clay cup is still warm in your hands, but your gaze drifts beyond the household courtyard to the sprawling markets of Tenochtitlan, where the story of cacao expands from taste to trade. You walk through the causeways, stepping carefully over stone pathways slick with the morning mist, and suddenly the city opens like a hive of sound. Stalls shout out wares, birds squawk from cages, the steady beat of drums drifts in from some distant temple. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, cacao beans change hands. It's easy to think of money as coins or crisp paper, but here, in this city of canals and floating gardens, the currency jingles in cloth bags filled with cacao beans. A handful could buy you a rabbit, 100 might get you a sturdy canoe. If you were particularly thrifty, you could trade exactly 80 beans for a good quality cotton cloak, provided you haggled with just the right amount of exasperated sighing. It's a barter system, yes, but with a standardized unit, something strangely modern in its structure. Now, here's where it gets quirky. Because cacao beans are perishable, people sometimes tried to cheat the system. Imagine peeling the shell, filling it with dirt or wax, then carefully sealing it back together. Counterfeit cacao, in other words, and the buyer wouldn't know until much later, when they reached for a cup of chocolate and got a mug of gritty disappointment instead. Historians still argue whether these scams were widespread or just rare anecdotes recorded by Spanish chroniclers trying to spice up their reports. Either way, the image of a market inspector biting into a bean like a jeweler testing gold is almost too good not to picture it out as you wander deeper into the market. The sensory experience becomes overwhelming. Spices burn your nose, chili peppers piled high, annotto seeds glowing red like embers, vanilla pods twisted into little braids. There's dried fish, piles of maize, woven mats, obsidian knives gleaming in the sun. And at nearly every stall, cacao appears not just as beans but as cakes, drinks, or offerings carefully wrapped in leaves. It is not merely food or currency. It is a thread binding the city's rhythm together. You pause at a stall where a merchant pours chocolate from one vessel to another, higher and higher, until the liquid forms a silky stream. Foam blooms like a crown at the top of the cup, and you realize that this market is not only about buying cacao, but about seeing it performed. Its preparation as much a spectacle as its consumption. People crowd to watch, some to buy, others simply to admire the artistry, like we might gather around a latte artist shaping foam into a swan. Of course, not everyone in this buzzing city could afford the pure, frothy stuff. For commoners, cacao was often watered down, mixed with maize, gruel, and flavored with whatever was at hand. For elites, the recipe might include rare flowers or spices brought in from hundreds of miles away. Historians debate whether these class distinctions were rigid or flexible. Was the foamy drink truly reserved for nobles, or could a hard-working trader, flush with success, splurge on a luxurious cup? The records contradict each other, leaving us to wonder how much of this exclusivity was lived reality and how much was political theater. Still, the symbolism was clear. Cacao was associated with strength, virility, and even divine energy. Warriors drank it before heading into battle. Priests consumed it before rituals. Brides and grooms exchanged it in marriage ceremonies. A single bean might seem small, but collectively it held the weight of entire institutions' economy, religion, and love. As the market noise swirls around you, you feel almost dizzy, like you're caught in a tide of beans, each one carrying a story. Some will be poured into clay jars for household use. Others will be offered to gods, left smoking beside temples, and some will simply vanish into a noble's treasury, counted and recounted. A currency as fragile and fragrant as it is powerful. The scent of cacao never quite leaves the air, clinging to your clothes, seeping into your skin, and you realize that here, in this city, chocolate is not dessert at the end of a meal. It is the pulse of daily life, bitterness and beauty brewed together, foamed into something greater than the sum of its beans. The market fades behind you, its chatter softening like distant waves, and you step into a quieter corner of the city where cacao takes on a different role. No longer just trade or drink. Here it becomes an offering, something that brushes the edge of the divine. You pass beneath stone walls etched with carving stylized jaguars, serpents, and the curling shapes of cacao pods themselves. Temples rise up, layered like giant stair-stepped pyramids, and at their base you find altars already dusted with flowers, incense, and yes, little piles of cacao beans arranged neatly, like coins left at a shrine. This is where the drink slips from the everyday into the spiritual. Priests whisk the liquid into froth, then pour it into bowls carved from gourds, holding them with reverence as though cradling the very breath of the gods. To them, the bitterness is not just flavor, but essence, something that carries life force, a connection between human mouths and celestial powers. It might sound dramatic, but think of how you cling to your morning coffee ritual. You probably wouldn't say it's divine, yet if you miss a cup, you feel reality unravel just a little. The Maya and Aztecs pushed that sentiment to the next level. Your sleepy latte moment transformed into a cosmic handshake. And here comes the quirky bit. Some rituals involved mixing cacao with blood, either from animal sacrifice or small human offerings, whisked into the drink as a sacred fusion. The idea was that cacao represented the earth's fertility, while blood embodied life itself. Historians still argue whether ordinary people ever actually drank this crimson mixture, or whether it was restricted to ritual contexts observed only by priests and kings. But the mental image of a divine cappuccino foam cacao and a drop of life essence is hard to shake. You can almost smell the incense wafting upward, copal resin burning thick and sweet, mingling with the sharper scent of cacao paste being ground on stone matates nearby. Women kneel at the edges of the courtyard,